Hey, thanks for watching our series on what I wish I'd learned in my Temple Prep class. Today we're going to talk about the other ordinance that is done in the temple called sealings. Sealings are something that is quite unique to the LDS philosophy. Um, it's it's not necessarily seen in a lot of other religions or things that are out there. So the sealings conceptually come from this idea that the priesthood or authority to act in the name of God gives you the ability to perform something, to seal something or enact something that not only is in effect in this world, but also will be in effect in the next world. So it's not like marriage is till death do you part. Most of the time in the LDS church, when we think of sealings, we think of marriage. And so a marriage that is sealed is not one that goes away at the end of this life, but is you'll still be married in the next life, is basically what that means. So it's the sealing power is this power to build connections to do things that will exist into the next life. The scriptural basis from this comes down to the ideas of I'm trying to remember off the top of my head the exact verses, but there's the scriptures that talk about sealing on earth and in heaven. Elijah and Elias being given sealing powers as well. So this idea that when a prophet says something, it can be still valid in the next life. He can promote blessings and cursings that can go on this life and in the next life. So that's kind of where it comes from. We don't have a lot of examples of sealings being done necessarily in the scriptures. We don't really have a lot on that as far as like scripture basis. Like we have quite a bit on baptism. We see in the New Testament the apostles baptizing, even a mention that Jesus baptized, but not as often or as much as his apostles. Book of Mormon talks about baptism. Those kinds of things are there, but for sealings, it's not. We don't get that there. Being sealed up unto eternal life is one that we sometimes will see mentioned. Usually, when a prophet, he gets to a certain level of spirituality, he is sealed unto eternal life, or that's that calling election made sure would be kind of a sealing type idea. So in general, sealings mean lots of different things that can happen under the priesthood, where something is done here in this life that continues into the next life. Basically, the effect of it will still be there. Most of the time, when we think of modern sealings in LDS temples, we're talking about the idea of marriage. This is, we'll hear, oh, are you getting sealed? Oh, yeah, our sealing date is this time. In LDS culture, using those terms for marriage are very synonymous. Like anybody else would talk about their wedding date. But in Utah and high LDS areas, it's usually sealing date is sometimes what they would talk about. So when a man and woman get married or sealed in the temple, basically they go to a room, and anytime you can see these rooms all over online. The church publishes lots of images. It's kind of one of the more popular rooms that they encourage people to look at. When you go to a temple, you usually walk through a couple of sealing rooms. The sealing room is usually a room where there's a couple sets of chairs on the far end of the walls, basically, and then there's mirrors up above those chairs. And then in the middle of the room is an altar. So usually what happens in a sealing is that for a marriage, the husband and wife will come together, kneel across the altar, and take each other by the hand, basically, and then they will. What's kind of cool about the setup of this room is when they look beyond their soon-to-be husband or wife, they see family in the chairs that are set up there, and then beyond them, you see the mirror, and they can basically, when the two stand up, they can see each other in this mirror. Because there's two mirrors facing each other, it gives you this effect of infinity. Basically, if you ever go through a temple open house, stand there and look at the mirror, and you'll see yourself. It looks like you're being repeated over and over and over again, basically, because the mirrors are reflecting each other. So it's kind of a symbolic metaphor of this idea of eternity, being sealed or married for eternity. So when the sealing happens, there's a prayer, there's a blessing and things that happen with it. In LDS culture, marriage and sealings again are tied together. This is what we see in our culture. That is slowly becoming pulled apart, where marriage and sealings are seen as separate. This is a change that really took off in the COVID years, just because you couldn't go to the temple to be sealed and married. So what a lot of people are doing is still getting legally married, but then getting sealed later once the temples were opened. And I think this is a trend that is not going away completely. Before COVID, to get married and sealed is the same thing. You would go to the temple, you'd fill out the paperwork, go through and get sealed, and then you'd sign the marriage certificate, get all the legal paperwork done. So the sealer has been given authority to legally marry you as well as spiritually seal you together. But again, because of COVID, we're seeing this transition away from that, where people are getting married in a legal court, like in a legal ceremony, and then being sealed later. Oftentimes, this is a more popular concept or popular way of doing things for families who have loved ones that aren't either members of the church or aren't active, worthy members for as far as going to the temple. So rather than make them sit outside the temple and wait while the marriage ceremony happens inside, and they only get to see the celebration as they come out. Some people are saying, well, we're going to opt to have a ceremony that's civil, and then we'll get sealed afterwards. And that's, I wouldn't say there's a wrong or right way to do it. That's just the choice that the people have. Technically, getting married and getting sealed are two different things. So legal marriage and sealing are different, basically, and can be done separately. They usually streamline them typically at the temple and do both at the same time, but they can be separate. So that's when you think of a new couple getting married, that's usually what they go through. Now, if you're already married, then you can be sealed. So again, you've done the legal part. Now it's do the spiritual part, which is go to be sealed. It's virtually basically the same ceremony. There really isn't much of a change in it. There's not a lot different in it. I haven't investigated this a whole lot, but I don't think there's a lot of change in the wording between sealed, if you're already married, getting sealed versus married and sealed at the same time. I don't think they changed the wording of the prayer, basically. So because again, most of it's mainly about the sealing together, basically. Um, and that's okay to do. Now, if you are sealed and then you have children, those children are what's called born under the covenant. So this is another common term you'll hear in dealing with sealings. Born under the covenant means your husband and wife were sealed. Kids are automatically sealed to them through birth, basically, because that's their birth, their children through birth. They're sealed to the mother and father automatically if the mother and father are sealed. If the mother and father are not sealed together when the baby is born, then they will have to go through a sealing ordinance to seal the baby to them. So if you get married outside the temple, have kids, and then get sealed later, your children will get sealed to you. It's kind of a fun. I wouldn't say it's worth going this direction, but it's kind of a fun thing, I think, for the children. A really special one for them and their parents, because this actually, the children who are not considered typically worthy to enter the temple actually get a chance to go into the temple. So they'll go in, people will take care of them while mom and dad go through the sealing and all that, get it all done. Then they will bring the children in directly up to the sealing room, so they can't see, they don't go through anything else in the temple. But then they go to the sealing room, and then they will sit on the altar. So husband and wife, mom and dad across the altar, child perpendicular to them, basically. To the side will put their hand on the other people, on their parents' hands, basically, to do the sealing. And so that's how that works, basically. So it's kind of a special moment in the sealing room where the family can all come together and see that. So the children kind of get what you could call a special dispensation to go into the temple temporarily, to go up to the sealing room to be sealed to their parents. And then after that, they can't go necessarily in until they get a valid temple recommend. So it's kind of a fun, kind of a special moment, I think, for families, so that where the church kind of goes, okay, we're gonna, let you have this moment because it's an important thing for your family, which is really neat. Um, Most of the time, that's when you talk about sealings. Now, you can go do sealings for the dead as well. So when you do genealogy and you find people, when after they get baptized and go through the endowments and initiatories and all that, you can go in and do sealings for husband and wife as well as children to parents and help with that. And it's kind of a neat idea because it's this concept. If you go back to the stories of Elijah turning the hearts of the fathers to the children to the fathers, the idea of building an eternal family unit. So connecting everybody in this huge network of family. If you've ever seen a genealogy chart that comes down and the generations get bigger and bigger and bigger, that's we're connecting them all together and doing all their ordinance work for them so that they have those opportunities. Um, so it's a fun thing to be involved with and to do. It's a really good experience. Now, sealings have significance in the LDS Church. They're very important ordinances. It's a very important ordinance to have done. It is so there's a little bit of fine lines we have to be careful with sealings. It is considered an ordinance of the priesthood. Uh, but it is not an ordinance that if you don't have it done, doesn't mean you don't get into heaven. Remember, baptism is getting into heaven. So to qualify for celestial kingdom, you need to be baptized. You don't need to have your endowments done. You don't need to have your sealings done to go to the celestial kingdom. Now, according to LDS philosophy, when you look at the Doctrine and Covenants and other things, because they believe there's different levels inside the celestial kingdom, these other ordinances help you to go up those levels. So endowment will help you go up to a higher level. Initiator or sealings will go up to another level as well in there. So these are different levels of inside the celestial kingdom. So they're not required. You don't have to do all of them necessarily to go to the celestial kingdom, but to go to the highest part of the celestial kingdom, that's where sealings come into play. So the highest part of the celestial kingdom is where is called exaltation. And exaltation is where that the concept of you and your spouse as a sealed married couple can become gods and goddesses and be able to populate your own worlds at some, maybe start your own worlds and those kinds of things. And you get to go through this whole process that we've done through mortality, but you get to do it from the perspective of God, being at the God level, and then have your children go through the mortal experience, your spirit children go to mortality and go through all this and so forth. It is a concept and a philosophy that is extremely unique to the LDS way of thinking about religion. I think it's a great tool. I think it's a great philosophy to have. I mean, why not have the opportunity to become a god and a goddess yourself, to create worlds, to control everything, to do all this? That's a cool goal. I think that's a nice thing, and it's a worthwhile thing to do. That's like I said, you have to study it and learn about it. And the purpose of this video is not to get into the doctrine of that, but there is plenty of general conference talks and other discussions and things out there on the church website and through the LDS tools or the Gospel Library and things that you can look up that can help you in putting together and thinking through those concepts and ideas. But that's the thing is we believe God wants us to be like him, basically, to be, or you could say be like our heavenly parents, really, and be connected together and make this all work out. So that's to be gods and goddesses, to inhabit worlds and to do all those things as well. He wants us to be equal with him, with our heavenly parents, basically. And that's where the endowment and the sealings come into play, is to allow us to do that, to reach those levels and accomplish that in the next life. That's basically sealings. They're pretty straightforward. It is something that's more, again, revealed revelation rather than scriptural as far as the details of it. But you can see in there when they talk about sealings unto life eternal, or things that are done, the sealing power, things that are bound on earth and bound in heaven. That's sealing power. It's basically a function of the priesthood of God, is what it comes down to. So that's basically what it is. It's a really great philosophy, I think. Great ordinance, well worth going for. You do have to live a higher standard. I mean, because you've got to make your marriage work, and you've got to get things to happen to make that work out. It's a good thing. I think it's a noble cause to help give you more emphasis in building a better marriage with your spouse, realizing that this is going to be a big deal. We want to figure out how can we work together and to make this a good experience in this life and, of course, in the next life as well. There are some questions that sometimes come up with sealings, like, what if I want to get a divorce? What if my marriage doesn't work out and we're sealed? What happens with that? So a couple of things that happen with this, we don't need to go into a ton of detail on this, but yes, you can get a annulment of your sealing. Okay, a temple divorce is another term that's used for this. This is where if you decide to get legally, so you can legally divorce your spouse and still be sealed to each other. Some people do that. They'll legally divorce, but they want to be together. I don't think that's a majority of people, but there is that possibility of legal divorce, but you're still sealed to each other. You can go through an annulment process, and that is where you have that sealing annulled at the temple, and the church basically takes that off the records. They break that, and so you're no longer sealed to each other. So it's something that's not to be taken lightly. It's something that, divorce should never be taken lightly by itself anyways. But when you add that emphasis of sealings, that is something to take into consideration. I think it is possible that, there are sometimes situations where it's going to be the right thing to do to get that annulled and to move on with your life. I know people who have gone through divorce, they've got their marriages annulled, and then they married somebody else and got sealed to them. And that's okay. That's up to, it's between you and your priesthood leaders and God basically to worry about that. So there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of other people's opinions floating around about this. I wouldn't take much stock in most of that basically, but just realize that this is something that is very important, a sacred ordinance, and so to break it is a serious thing, to annul those. So, but that is not something that if it's not you as one of the people being divorced, or if you're not the priesthood leader for one of those people, don't worry so much about it. If somebody wants to get theirs annulled and they get it worked out, that's up to them to decide. I would be careful passing judgment on people as they go through this process. It's their sealing. It's an ordinance and a covenant between them and their spouse and God. So let them take care of it. They'll figure it out. You don't need to worry too much about it. The other most common question that sometimes comes up is because there's a little quirk in how sealings are utilized in the LDS Church. Sealings in the LDS Church do have in there this idea that a man can be sealed to a woman and then get sealed to another woman as well. The most common example of this is President Nelson, the current prophet. He is still sealed to his first wife, and he is sealed to his second wife as well. Now, the thing to realize though is on the flip side of this, women are not allowed to be sealed to more than one man. So men can be sealed to multiple wives. Women can only be sealed to one man. I believe this is, so you think about it, this is what some people would call spiritual polygamy. Basically, some people try to say President Nelson's a polygamist because he's technically sealed to more than one woman. Now, you have to understand polygamy and realize there's a contrast between legal marriage, which is what polygamy is, and being sealed. Okay, there's a difference in distinction in this. And a lot of people try to make those equal and don't want to make that distinction. If you look at like Joseph Smith, in fact, some people complain he's married to a lot of women. He's sealed to a lot of women. He only married a couple women. Basically, most of the women that are claimed to be married to Joseph were sealed, meaning not a legally binding marriage in this life. It is for the next life only. They're sealed, but not legally married. So it's only for the next life that they would be husband and wife, basically. So in this life, the legal marriage is the thing that creates the problems around polygamy. So there is that distinction that is made. The church doesn't give a lot of clear, like it doesn't try to delineate this out. It just that's the way it is. Could it be that this is a bit of a holdout philosophically from the days of polygamy and still giving polygamy a little bit of a credence in LDS philosophy? Maybe that's all it is. It's just an old remnant, it hasn't been swept away. But there could be also this idea, because polygamy has been allowed in the past, polygamy has been done and sanctioned by God, like Abraham and others. So maybe this is still allowed. Polygamy, in a way, is allowed in heaven. Now, what happens in heaven, that's a whole other ball of wax. We don't necessarily need to worry about that. Our goal for this life is to get us to where we can earn those, go to the celestial kingdom in the next life, basically. Once we get there, we can worry about the rest of that. So it is technically possible for one man to be sealed to multiple women, but only a woman to be sealed to one man. And that sometimes can be a sticking point for people. But it's the way it is right now. Could it change? Maybe. I don't know if it is or isn't going to change at all, honestly. But it is there. Okay, just so you're aware. It doesn't necessarily mean the church is evil or wrong or bad because of it. But some people try to use it as a tool or a weapon to go counteract against the church. And it's not, it's again, the sealing power is a very important power to have. And it does help us to build more family units, basically, through eternity, which is great. Can it be used in a wrong way? Yes. What if a woman is sealed to the wrong person? Are they going to be required to be sealed to that person in the next life? No. I believe when we get through the resurrection time period and the judgment time period at the end of the world, I'm sure there's going to be what we could call a great correction period, where as we verify and make sure all these things are in place, that those will be corrected. There'll be that opportunity to have that fixed and adjusted. Just like if someone doesn't get married in this life at no fault of their own, does that deny them their exaltation because no one chose to marry them? No, it does not, because they will have that, during that correction period, they'll have the opportunity to get married to someone and then go have their exaltation. So God is a fair God. God is going to deal with all those little issues that happen. If you ever get into church history and learn it more, the sealing powers were seen a little differently back in Joseph Smith's day in the 1800s. They saw it more as a way to make connections rather than a way to continue connections. So in today's world, we think of it from a genealogy standpoint of we're sealed to, I'm sealed to my parents, they're sealed to their parents, my kids are sealed to me, kind of a thing. We think the family genealogy chart as the same as sealings. In the 1800s, that wasn't the case. While they still did sealings that way, they thought of sealings as a way of creating connections. And so sometimes men would be sealed to Joseph and Emma as a son to build a connection between two families. A couple of the young women that Joseph Smith was married to were sealed to, I should say, not married to, were part of this to build a connection between two families in the church. So again, this is all sealings, which means it's all going to be of effect in the next life more than this life. So there's some strange applications they used back then, some different perspectives of sealing they had back then. Again, they chose to do what they did, and it's all going to get sorted out. I believe in that great sorting period that happens around resurrection and judgment, basically at the end of the world. So we don't have to worry too much about it. The main thing is focusing on yourself, getting yourself prepared and ready to be sealed and to go through that and to be worthy of that. Live worthy of being with that spouse of yours, working together to build a good marriage and family unit as well. So thanks for watching. If you have questions about this, again, put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. Like and subscribe to the channel. Share these videos out to let other people know about them. And we really appreciate your time and efforts in being involved in our channel. Thank you so much.